Oh, thank you, Miesco. Yes. So I was just introducing Paolo's. Very sorry for this. So I was saying that it's 9:30, and we can start with our first session about blockchain standardization for innovative companies and startups by Paolo Campegiani, that he's a blockchain and digital identity expert. So Paolo, if you are ready.
Okay, yes, I'm ready. Thanks, Carmen.
Perfect.
Good morning, everyone. So I'll try to share my screen, but it says that, okay, yes, it is possible. Let me see. Now you should
I
see
just stopped. Yeah.
these. Okay, perfect. Now you see if I'm able to say that I want to have it full screen, so a bit more audacious. Okay, perfect. Okay.
Perfect.
In this talk, I talk about the blockchain standardization from, let's say, trying to give relevant elements for innovative companies and startups. My idea is that many cases, companies, even bigger companies than a startup, are not considering standardization because it's maybe a bit complex to move in this world, which is very specific with some very specific rules. And in order to give you some ideas, some possible elements for your own thoughts, I decided to follow some kind of bit of a personalistic approach, some of the sense that I focus a bit on my journey in this world. This is a journey for me that I started some years ago. As you see, I work for a company, Bit4ID. We are not discussing about Bit4ID here, just to tell you that what I'm going to say here is more or less my views only. So there are a lot of elements here, and I don't want to discuss these just to tell you that there are reasons why I'm discussing about standardization. Even if I'm still a bit of a newcomer in this world, I've already done some things because I'm a member of some specific standardization groups, or as they better call it, standardization bodies or standardization organizations. And for one of them, which is ISO, I'm also the lead editor, the project leader for writing a technical report that you see in the third point, overview of DLT systems for identity management. Probably now you not necessarily know what a technical report is. You'll understand this by the end of this presentation. Also, I represent my company in many associations. Some of them you see are also very specific for the blockchain world. Just to tell you that unfortunately or fortunately for me, my company is not paying me for doing all these things related to standardization, but in my company, I usually manage innovation projects in the fields of digital identity and blockchain. So the first questions that I want to discuss with you are a general view about general views on standards. And the first one is what standards are for? Why do we need standards in the world? First point, this is by far the most relevant because you want to have a product, your product probably, that is interoperable with others. Imagine that you have light bulbs, you want to put them inside a socket. Clearly you need that these two elements have to follow some very tight mechanical and technical specifications. Otherwise, it will be quite difficult. You see this for the light bulbs. It's very simple for you to buy a light bulb when you need that one. You don't see this happening for the plug and the sockets in the wall. And this is why when you travel, you need an adapter. Interoperable is a very important word because it means that everyone agrees to a common standard. It's not that you have forced to implement and follow what others are doing. So there is a common approach and there is no need for you to adapt to others, but to adapt to something more general, more standardized actually. Another important point, this is relevant for innovative companies, is that a standard is like a reverse charge. I simplified this saying, quoting this very hypothetical, I hope for you, line of reasoning. I follow the standard, your honor. I mean that if you are following one standard and something breaks, and something bad happens, no one could charge you because you have decided to try something that is new. That's the point, as long as you follow the standard. Standards are critical for every business. You said there is a pair of glasses because I want to tell you a very short story on that. You may know, there are details on the right side of the screen, that some year ago, Europe came up with the nickel directive. This nickel directive essentially limits the amount of nickel that could be released from jewelry or things that are on long contacted or prolonged contact with the skin, including glasses, because there are people that suffer from this exposition to nickel. And what happened? There was a very big company that was making eyeglasses, I mean the order of hundreds of millions of turnover per year, not a small one. And they were approached by these people, and these people told them, hey, we are writing a directive that could be relevant for you, that could impact your business. We would really like if you are going to participate. And this company says, no, I'm not interested. Okay, thanks. And the discussion continued. They came up with some specific limits on the amount of nickel that could be released. And these limits, if you see the units of measure, are based on a 1 week. I mean, we consider what happens after 1 week. They are based on a surface area, how much nickel is released considering the size of the contact area, and with specific numbers. As you could already have imagined, what happened is that this company, from one day to the other, had all of its production, all its products, that have to be destroyed because they were no longer compatible with the law. Now you see me, okay, I'm very sorry for them, but I'm not making eyeglasses. I'm working ICT. Perfect. You see this book, Huawei Stories, and there is a chapter about standardization written by this person, Daixi Zheng, that you may know probably, may not know probably, okay, but is essentially the person that for Huawei is managing standardization, okay? And this book, this person says about standardization. This is a back version because unfortunately was not able to have access to the original book in English. So I'm back versioning from a text, from an Italian text provided by Alessandro Areso, but the meaning is still here. And it says, in the 2G standards, we're just an observer. In the 3G, a follower. In the 4G, 4.5G, an active participant and a leader. Now the 5G has begun. Huawei's team are embracing the 5G with more enthusiasm than ever. Today, Huawei is a fundamental player for global standards. So not the most important, but one of the aspects that has allowed the Huawei to have success, and they think that is so important that they've decided to have it in a book describing their story as a company, is that they embrace standards. They started with a small company that was trying to understand what was happening, and now they are a global leader. I wish you all you the same, clearly, and this is why standards are important for us. So, if standards are so beautiful, okay, why they have this nomen that they are somehow bad? Because there are bad parts in the standard world. To write a standard takes a lot of time, and this means that takes a lot of money. And the process is not very simple. On the contrary, it's very complex because it has to be very formal, very structured, very well organized. It has to find a consensus between different parties. And this means that you have that everyone agrees on something, or at least objections are very small. And all these procedures are not very well clear outside of the community. And this means that the entry barrier is very high. And unfortunately, there are many acronyms. You see in this presentation that the standardization processes are based on a very specific jargon. But there is open this, there are also good parts, because for me, I say, it was a very interesting way to spend part of my working time, or overworking time maybe, because I met and I'm meeting innovators from all over the world, literally, because in some of these organizations you could see people from New Zealand to Canada to Chile to Russia and everything in between, okay? You travel a lot. Now, clearly, it depends to you if you like to travel. Now, unfortunately, we are not able to travel, but usually standardization means that there are face-to-face meetings that are very well planned in advance, but there are. And also remember this point, as Professor Tannenbaum said, the good part about standards is that there are so many to choose from. So if you don't like a specific standard, you could write on something else. So it's a very large world. And in fact, these are just some, and not all of them, of the standardization organizations that are called SDO. And we discussed about a couple of them in this presentation, but just to tell you that there are many different organizations. And in fact, there are many more of that. I was not considering to put all of the names in a slide, because if you look on some specific entry on Wikipedia, you will find tens, dozens, if not hundreds of different standardization organizations. And so let's try to put them in some categories to provide some kind of taxonomy, loosely speaking. First, different standardization organizations have different geographic coverage. There are some of them that are covering the entire world, ISO, IEEE, OASIS, okay? Others are focused on a specific region of the world. And typically this is Europe, because Europe is clearly a kind of particular kind of region in the world, because it's different states, but just a big single digital market. ETSI and CENELEC. Also, there are organizations that are covering a specific country. So as an example, ANSI for USA, AFNOR for France, DIN Germany, UNI for Italy. This means that if you want to join AFNOR, which is a French organization, standardization organization, you could do this usually only because you are a representative of a company that is based in France. I'm an Italian, my company has not subsidiaries in French, so I cannot join AFNOR. Another important differentiation between standardization organization is what is called de jure and de facto standards. Standards de jure means that is the law will enforce the standard. So as an example, if you see what happens in ISO, in CENELEC, in ETSI, in ANSI, in UNI, many others, clearly, what they say as the value of law. Now I'm simplifying this because the discussion about how a standard is accepted inside the body of law of countries is quite a complex topic, but let's just say that at some point, if one of these comes up with an idea about what blockchain is, like ISO and CENELEC, so organizations that are covering the entire world, this will surely impact your country. The others are standards de facto. No one is forced to follow them, except that you decide to do this because you think it's better to be interoperable. IEEE, W3C, IETF, and so on. Just to give you an idea of the difference between these two, TCP/IP is a de facto standard. There are a lot of documentation on how we have to implement a conformant TCP/IP stack. For sure, you could do a lot of tests, but there is not a law requiring you to do that. You are free to do whatever you want to do. It's just your problem. ISO-OSI, on the contrary, has provided a stack for telecommunication networks, which is based on 7 levels, if you remember, and this is de jure. So it's a formal document, and when it comes as an example to a public procurement, in this case, okay, if I say that I want you to follow the ISO-OSI model, this means that you have to follow the ISO-OSI model. Now, in this presentation, I focus just on a couple of them, of these many different standardization organizations. One is ISO, one is CENELEC, and this is because it's where I spent a big part of my professional lives in the world of standards. And both of them are specific technical committees or joint technical committees. You see, we start with acronyms, unfortunately, that are on blockchain and distributed ledger technologies. There is a reason why we have 2 groups doing what apparently is the same. What is important to say is that there is a cooperation between these 2 groups, not only because many of us are participating in both, but also because there is a specific formal agreement. So if one of them comes up with a standard, the other will essentially recognize the standard. So we avoid overlapping and we avoid conflicting standards. Now, let's say that you want to join ISO. Okay, there is this worldwide organization that works on blockchain. I want to work with them. ISO does many different things, not only ICT. If you want to work on physical security at the airport, social responsibility, financial services, plastic materials, waste management, circular economy, and some other hundreds of topics, ISO as a place for that. But okay, I want to join ISO for blockchain. First, you cannot, because ISO is an international organization whose members are states. This means that you as a person, as a company, usually cannot join ISO. And in order to participate in ISO, you do this through your national standardization body, which means that your national standardization body has created what is called a National Mirror Committee. You are a member of this National Mirror Committee, and this committee delegates you to work on ISO as an expert. And you see here the members of ISO TC 307. It's not all the countries in the world, actually, but a very good number of them. You see there are 3 different colors here. Australia is a dark blue because it's the secretariat. So essentially they're managing the group from a bureaucratic point of view. The blue ones, so the biggest part of Europe, United States, America, Brazil, and many others, are members, full members. The others in, let's say, yellow or whatever color it is, they are observing members. So they are informed of what is happening, but not participating. You see that essentially all of Europe is in it, with the notable exception of Greece, which seems strange to me because Greece is clearly a member of ISO, but at the time being, at least this is from the official site of ISO, they are not participating in it. So if you are in any country of Europe that is member of ISO, you contact of this specific committee, you contact your national standardization body, you say, I want to work on this. ISO is quite an interesting place, I have to tell you, because this is an article from the New York Times of 3 years ago. Blockchain will be theirs. Russian spy boasted a conference. And they say that the head of the Russian delegation worked for the FSB, the intelligence agency that is successor to the KGB. And they say, now the Russians are speaking, look, the internet belongs to the American, but blockchain will belong to us. This means that when a standardization organization has states as direct members, what happens in this organization is state matter. So we are all friends, we are working together because we all want to have blockchain that are interoperable. We want to spread this technology all over the world, but there are statewide interests in this. And so it's not strange that you see people from the secret services participating in this. Okay. Now, how is organized TC47? Essentially, there are 3, it is organized in groups. There are 3 of them. One is the study group. The study group, SG, is essentially an initial discussion on a specific matter. So we are not sure if this is relevant, but we want to study. A working group is more structured and is a very specific mission. Usually means, okay, I want to analyze, as an example, security, identity, and privacy implications and standards, clearly related standards for blockchain. Also, there are other groups, there are advisory groups and coordination groups. Another important point is that standardization is not something that happens when you are isolated from all other people in the world. On the contrary, there are a lot of connections between many different standardization bodies, and they take the names of liaison from the French word. This liaison could also be relevant, could also means a link, a connection. So you are connected to someone else, so you participate in the work, or they are connected in yours. And this means that they participate in what you are doing. Also, organization could have a liaison if there are very good reasons for doing that. This, you see, is a structure of TC7. There are many different groups. Just to give you an example, working group number 3 on the bottom screen is about smart contracts and their applications. This means that if you want to standardize smart contracts, this is the place for you. You see that, as an example, SG7 is a study group on interoperability of blockchain. So if you want to work on interoperability, that's your place. And you see the one with the longest name, JWG4. This is a joint, because it's possible for you that the working group is joined between one standardization body, like ISO TC47, and the other, like ISO ESC JTC1 SC27, which is SC27. SC means Special Committee, and this is about cybersecurity. As you could imagine, the SC27 about cybersecurity is a very, very, very big group, very well structured, very well complex. They have already published something like 300 different standards. There are the liaisons, not all of them, because otherwise it won't be possible to have all the names in this slide. But as an example, to give you an idea, the very last one, this technical committee on geographic information and geomatics has said, okay, I think that what you are doing in blockchain is interesting to me. So I want to follow what you are doing, and I propose a liaison. TC307 has accepted the liaison, and there is a person delegated by this TC 211 that is following the activities on TC307. So this is one way of the liaison. The other way is someone from TC307 that is following what is happening in other groups. Just you see the last name is highlighted, financial services, because TC68 is about financial services. At some point, the good people TC68 decided to come up with a technical report, which is an analysis of how to use blockchain for financial world. Perfect. Considering that there is a liaison, I'm expert of TC307, I received a message say, okay, they have written this document. What do you think? And as an example, me as an expert has discussed providing what we call comments on this document, because by the way, I don't like it a lot. So I make some requests to change the document, to rephrase, reformulate, restate its different parts, and so on and so forth. Also, there are organizations that could participate. As you see, in many cases, these organizations are no-profit organizations, but it's not a strict requirement. One of them, as an example, is the European Commission. You say that they are all marked as A. This means that considering that the European Commission is a liaison, every officer that works for the European Commission could have access to all the documents that we are working on TC47. He or she could vote on all of these documents, and also he could be elected to chair one of this group. You say in terms of blockchain relevant are the Blockchain and Climate Institute, Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, INATBA, and so on and so forth. Okay. Now, unfortunately, I told you there are many acronyms, and we have to spend a bit of time here. These are the standards that are now being developed by TC47. Now, let's start to understand this mess of numbers, otherwise it could be quite a problem. The first one on the right, ICS, ignore this. This is just a classification, okay? So the last column is not relevant. Look on the names. As an example, mid-screen, you see blockchain distributed ledger technologies, vocabulary. You see that this name is ISO 22749 2020. And you see the number is 90.92. 90 means this is an official standard. So people could buy this document and understand what are the definition of blockchain from the point of view of ISO. 92 means we are already making a new version. To make you another example, the very last element, ISO DTR 23249. This is the one I'm working as a project leader. This is an overview of existing DLT system for identity management. This is a 3060. 30 means it's an internal document yet, but 60 means we have asked the countries that are member of ISO if they agree with the document and to become a standard. This is why it's called a DTR, draft technical report. So it's under a formal process. Now, our activities are organized at the working group level. In the working group level, usually we meet twice a year, not face-to-face, clearly not in these troubled times, but this was the norm, more or less. In this face-to-face meeting, we plan the activity for the next month. So an example, we decide to start a study group, a technical report, technical specification, or if the activity is already started, at some point, we decide to discuss the comments that we received and manage and dispose these comments. So an example, someone says, okay, I don't like how this is written because for this, that, and that reason, and we decide about this comment. Activities are based on consensus, which means that we prefer to spend 1 hour and have everyone agrees on a comment regarding how big or small it is, rather than to vote. That's the point. This means that the time it takes to have a standard is very, very long. Documents are written in very specific format. They are Word documents, okay, but they have to follow very specific templates. As an example, lines are numbered and so on and so forth. And everything that we discuss, everything that we vote, every decisions we take, whatever, is written. And this is important because you could imagine that not everyone speaks English perfectly. Also in ISO, formally, the 3 official languages of ISO are English, French, and Russian. So if someone starts speaking in French or in Russia, it is possible for this person to do that. Usually, especially in a committee that's about technology, information technology, we agree implicitly to use only English because we don't have otherwise translators. And when it comes that something is written on document, usually this means that you have months to provide your own comments. It's not that something you have to do in a couple of days. Things are a bit different at the technical committee level because it is a governing body is called a plenary. This means also twice a year, clearly in the same days, in the same venue when we have the meeting for the working group. What is important is that when you are working on a working group level, you represent yourself, so you're free to say what you want. At the TC level, so in the plenary, you represent your country. So there are formal decisions, and when it comes to vote, you see, okay, everyone agrees, no, French is against this resolution, UK abstain or whatever. For me, that was quite a thrilling experience because the first really plenary I've joined, that was in London 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, I was the only one from Italy. So I have to represent my country without having the slightest idea what we were discussing about. The plenary decides the structure of the technical committee. So you could decide to create a working group. He has to elect the chair, the conveners. This is the technical term of the working group, and the liaison. And also they vote on the resolution. So each country votes, each country counts as one on the final publication of the document, the technical report, the specification, so on and so forth. A technical report is the first step towards the technical specification. Technical report means this is how things are happening now. Technical specification is how things have to be done in the future. ISO is a de jure standardization organization because imagine that, as an example, the vocabulary has been published by ISO as a standard. Now, what happens is that every country, not only European, every country that is member of ISO could say, okay, has only 2 possibilities left. The first one is, okay, I accept this document as an official standard for my country. Or you could say, I don't like it. But they have no possibility to say, in my country, things will be different. So once there is a specific definition for blockchain, in this ISO vocabulary, as an example, each country in the world essentially agrees with this definition, whether you like it or not, because it's not possible to you to change at national level the standard. What you could do is to ask for a revision. Okay, this is possible because we have a standard published in 2020. We already started working on a new version. Not discussing this in detail because it could be very complex, but somehow this means that a de jure standard is like a law. So formally, legally binding definitions, architectures, workflows, whatever. So it's very difficult to escape a standard. That's the point. This is a picture you see that was taken in November 2019 in Hyderabad in India. This is the plenary, actually. Okay, you see, it's not really overcrowded. Let's say that there are representative of more or less 35 countries. In this one, the plenary decided to give me the honor and the responsibility to write a technical report. The technical report should be about how digital identity is managed, implemented by DLT systems, not only blockchain, because in ISO there is a difference in the vocabulary between blockchain and DLT. DLT is a more general business concept, let's say that. And the technical report is just a description of relevant projects, initiatives. And usually it's before, because it paves the way for the technical specification. So this document has a scope. What we have to do, we have to describe how we manage identity for individuals, organizations, things, function, and processes with DLT systems. We describe actors and their interactions. We provide architecture. We discuss existing standards and framework. And currently, this document contains, as an example, a taxonomy for DLT systems managing digital identity. There are around 10 major DLT systems from all different regions in the world, and also describes 50 and more standards, frameworks, and associations. Now, this document is quite mature, and we were incredibly fast, because imagine that this activity started in November 2019. Then there are some formal process that we have to implement before you could actually start doing things. This means we have to wait for April 2020. And now, less than 1 year later, the document is quite mature, because now we are voting about this document to have it published. This is a wild, crazy race for ISO, not a simple process. And this document will be published in the mid of this year. And if you are willing to participate, you have first to join ISO TC 307 by your national standardization body, and then you ask to join this joint WG4, or you could write me an email, it's not a problem. Another one, okay, we have discussed about ISO. I want to tell you about this one, Sensenelec JTC, Joint Technical Committee 19. This is a European SDO. And this means that you could join it usually only if you represent a company or an organization, whatever, that is based in Europe. Europe is not in the sense of European Union, it's also the European Free Trading Area. So this also includes Switzerland, UK, Norway, and something more, I don't remember, but it's not in the political sense, but in the economic sense, okay. You ask your organization, I want to participate. Why you should decide to participate in Sensenelec JTC 19? Because when we decided to create this group, this was a discussion that I have the honor to participate in it. So this is why I say I'm one of the founders, not the only one, clearly on the contrary. We say, okay, in Europe, there are specific elements that are related to standardization for blockchain. Because in Europe, we have a very specific pieces of legislation. As an example, the GDPR regulation, EIDAS, NIS, OAuth, which is OAuth is the once only principle, the Cybersecurity Act, so on and so forth. And we want to provide European companies ways to have them, to allow them to implement solutions based on blockchains or DLTs that are compatible with these laws. Because if you essentially implement a blockchain system or whatever component you write, you have to follow GDPR. And you know that if you're not following GDPR, you could subject to very heavy fines. So it's something that you cannot do because, okay, who cares? It's a really important problem, especially for medium, big companies. This is a critical showstopper because they are more than afraid to implement a system managing real data, considering that they could be considered liable for what they have done. And the only way for them to implement one of these systems is to have a technical guidelines that says, okay, if you want to implement a DLT system that is managing personal data, so a system that falls within the scope of the GDPR, if you do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, if you implement these technical measures, you are following a standard. This doesn't mean that it's possible that someone suit you and you have to discuss this in a court. But this means that at least you have a very important defense line saying, I follow the standard. This is why we have decided to do this. Because ISO is focused on other things, and for the good or for the bad, consider these elements as region-specific issues. Clearly, they are not, but okay. So we are working on these elements on SEN, SENELEC, JTC 19. And the important point is that when we will come up with a standard or regulation, a technical guidelines, whatever, this will be recognized by ISO. There will be a formal process by which ISO is notified that the good fellows of JTC 19 have done a work on this and could recognize it. And so we could work, we avoid any duplications or conflicting standards or whatever. Actually, the activities for JTC 19 is focused on identity management. We have decided to consider this specific point, but clearly it's possible to work on other things in the future. Now, I'm approaching the conclusion of this. I've been a bit faster than expected, but so could be some more time for discussion. From your point of view of innovative companies, clearly, when it comes to participating standards, there are many objections that someone could come up with. One of these says, if I participate in a standardization process, others will steal my idea because I have a very specific idea. I want to implement this very specific idea. If I discuss this in a standardization body, by definition, all the world sooner or later will know what I'm trying to do. Now, on this specific point, there are some considerations that I want to make. The first one, if you have a good idea, the best way to protect it is using a patent. Don't think that you could protect your idea simply because people don't know your idea, because sooner or later people will know. So if your idea has elements that could be protected using a patent, you have to file a patent. There are companies in TC307 that have started filing patents for their specific technologies, and then now they are very small companies, startups. And now they have joined TC307 because they want that the world says, okay, your patent is very good. It could be part of the overall picture about blockchain. Very sensible strategy. Second point, understand that this is something that don't you like, but this is let's face the truth. You are not the smartest guys in the world, probably. This means that if you have a very good idea, sooner or later, someone else will come up with more or less the same idea. And this means that maybe they are participating in a standardization group, and they have a standard that is more compatible with their ideas than with your own idea. Third point, in many cases, your idea is probably more focused not on technology elements, but on some kind of specific business model, or that you want to create a specific network of early adopters, or a specific commercialization strategy. All of these elements are not part of the standard. No one discusses in a standard how Hyperledger Fabric, just to give you a name, or Ethereum are being pushed around the world. No one cares about that. So if your business has a relevant part, a qualifying part that is about the business model, the network of people using your system, the network effect, whatever, don't worry. On the contrary, being in a standardization means that you could have access to more people that could be more interested in what you're doing. So it's also part of marketing. Again, yes, but I've written some very, very clever code that solves a problem because I've implemented something very nice, very complex, whatever. Don't worry, standards are not about discussing your code, and there is no need for you to share your code, and usually people are not interested in code. I could tell you that you will never find in ISO standard a piece of code, clearly, because the discussion is focused on other levels of abstraction. And also, you are not forced to share things that you do not want to share. You participate in standardization body. You could provide, you could not provide the comments or documents or whatever. This is up to you. You are not forced. Usually consider that as an example in joint WG4 of the one where we are doing this work on digital identity and blockchain. There are like 300 experts, but the regulars are probably a very small fraction of them. So you are free to participate or not. It's up to you. And this, for me, is the last very most important point. Remember this, that standardization happens with or without you. It's not that the rest of the world is saying, okay, I don't want to standardize because this person is not doing this work. The other people will do this work. And this means that when they have to decide the standardization, remember that in all these kind of organizations, if you are absentee, you are wrong. That's the point, because only the people that are actively participating in the meeting could have their ideas enforced on the system. So this means that clearly you have competitors. That's the point. And at the same time, these competitors, small, big, medium, large, whatever kind of companies they are maybe participating in these activities. And they will come up with a standard. That's the point. The point is that this standard could be against you, in the sense that once this will be a standard, you have to, if you want, as an example, to be interoperable with others, if you want to be compatible with others, if you want to participate, this is just my last slide, so I stop my presentation and continue talking. This means that when the standard will be, you will force it to adapt you to the standard. That's the point. And as an example, this means that, or other, maybe also considering procurement. If you want to participate in a procurement, at some point, this procurement tells, okay, provide me a standard that is following a solution that is following the specific standard. It's up to you to be compatible, not the other way around. So, and there is also another important point that you have to understand. You're small companies, but think big, want art. Standardizations processes, as we have seen in the beginning with these elements from the New York Times, from Huawei, whatever, are also a kind of a geopolitical tool, because this is a really important point. And Europe, as union, the European Union as a whole, is considering this quite important. And considering this quite important because, in fact, is supporting companies that are trying to work on standardization. So I'm not familiar now with the details of the block pool calls, but in many cases, if you are doing standardization, this could be part of your work. The European Union has an annual working plan on standardization. When they say what is important to standardize, it is important to work on 5G, blockchain, cloud computing, artificial intelligence, high performance computing, these kind of elements. So in a much larger, very much larger scope, this is an important game for Europe as a whole. So clearly you say, okay, but I'm a small company. I have to create a minimum viable product. Okay, perfect. I'm not asking you to divert your energies and work on standardization from tomorrow. It's possible, totally, it's up to you. It could be part of your strategy or not. I'm not here to discuss your strategy. My idea with this presentation was to give you some elements to help you understand how things are organized in the standardization world. And that what happens in the standardization world sooner or later will impact your business. That's for sure. As an example, my company is a digital identity company. We started as an hardware manufacturer providing smart cards, readers, tokens, these kind of devices. All of these are based on specific standards, and we have to follow the standards. And when these standards were written, essentially our company didn't exist. That's the point, okay? Because these standards are in the late 90s. And we have to follow them And no one cares if we like these standards or not. We have just to follow them. That's the important point. Now imagine that if my company is participating in the blockchain standardization process, if for the hope, with the hope that sooner or later, what we'll decide will be relevant for our business, not tomorrow, but 5 years from now. This is the kind of strategic thinking that you have to do with blockchain, or sorry, with innovation and standardization. So maybe it's not important again for you to do this now. If you want, I'd be happy to provide you all the information, or at least point you to the relevant people. Perfect. But that's it. That's the idea. So this essentially ends my speech, more or less. I see we have 15 minutes. So if there are any questions, I'd be very happy to try to answer. Not necessarily, I'm not such an expert, so but at least try, don't worry. I see that you essentially have to, or you could either use the chat or you could open your microphone as you prefer.
Good morning, Paolo. My name is Mieszko. Thank you for the interesting talk. So from a practical standpoint, what role in a startup do you think is appropriate to participate in ISO standardization? So should this be a developer, a CTO, or something similar?
Probably the best one is a project manager. Thanks for your question, Mieszko. Is probably someone that understands technology, but also understands how to manage people, because it's a political thing, it's a political setup. So a developer is usually a person that really suffers in standardization activities because they say, because first they're not discussing about software, and second, because the kind of discussion could seem apparently pointless. So someone that understands, so not necessarily a salesman, because there's nothing you have to sell, not directly at least, but a project manager or a technical architect, this kind, someone that already interacts with customers. That's my idea.
Okay, thank you. And maybe a follow-up question, maybe a bit more critical one. So you described that the standardization process takes sometimes years or even more. So, you know, in a startup context, this might be a problem, right? We have a 2-year runway perhaps, and if we don't make it, we'll probably, you know, cease to exist. Is there?
So not okay. So, okay.
No, but you know, I'm just making it a bit more spicy, the question. But are there any, you know, IM4 standards? For example, we applied the DIN spec on privacy by blockchain design in our architecture, but this was a bit of a passive experience. So we read it, we bought some consultancy and applied it. Do you think that's a good way to start working on standards?
This is a way to apply standards, because you were not in the position to say, this is what I see here is illogical, I don't like this approach, or has a very big impact on my business, because maybe you have to change many parts of your system to implement something that you not totally agree with. The problem that you are highlighting is quite real. What you could do is, as an example, you could try to join your national organization like DIN. I can imagine that you're considering, so I guess you're from Germany. And this means that you could start receiving the documents as they are written. When you see these documents, as an example, now we are discussing about the technical report of smart contracts. We have received this document. I'm not a member of the group of smart contracts. I received the document. I'm providing my personal comments on that. That's the idea. And this, even if you're not providing comments, you understand what they are trying to do. So you will say, okay, I'm compatible. And this is a selling point for you. Because one of your customers could say, okay, but how could you guarantee me that 3 years from now, 5 years from now, this system would be still operational? You could say, I'm following the standard. I could say that there are no standards, but I'm compatible with what is now written at the time being. This is a selling point. For at least for some customers, it depends a lot on the kind of customers, clearly. Not the end users doesn't care about that, but maybe a company, someone with a relevant political profile, they take care of that for sure.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, big companies definitely, you know, corporates and NGOs definitely like that. I think that's a very good point. Okay, thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks for your question. Someone else?
Hi, Paolo. I'm Simone.
Hello, Simone.
I found really interesting this speech. We never speak about it, and we saw a lot of standardization organization. We never know how to act. I want only to bring my small experience on that, because there is an interesting point in participating. I'm entering now a group that is creating the standardization for the ECOL. The ECOL is the system to detect the accident in the motorcycle and do an emergency call automatically. No, I found my way in this point. How can I develop this? No, there are many ways, and I had to search for the standardization group. And one important thing is not only that you can contribute, but that you can have information in advance. So
exactly
what you say to the customer, how can I know that your ECOL will work in 5, 10, 6 years? No, because actually now there is, I was investigating, and there is no standard. If there is no standard, everyone is doing as they think is the right way. No, but we don't know if my BMW motorcycle that is sold with the ECOL designed from BMW only will be working in 3, 4, 5 years. So
exactly. This means that the customers are not buying the product because they say this is a lock-in. Because if I buy a product from a specific company, this might not work with my emergency services, whatever, in my country. And this means no one is going to buy anything, and we are stuck. That's a problem, totally. And this could be very interesting as an approach. And I thank you for having brought to us this, because this is not only a ICT system. It's something that unfortunately has to do with the law of physics, because there is an accident, and this is a very unfortunate possibility, and you have to do things that are very specific for that context. As an example, how you contact emergency services. This is an important, clear. How do you let these people know that maybe there are injured people, and one of them is allergic to penicillin, because we have to avoid these people giving them penicillin, because otherwise they'll die for sure. So it's quite a big problem, actually, quite important. And again, when someone works in this, not only is capable to create a system, but knows what others people are doing this. So you see what they're doing and say, okay, I have a better idea, so okay, I could do this in my country or whatever. This is the real value. It's a network. This is some kind of very advanced marketing activity from one point. And you have to manage in the same way.
What we found is we were in a meeting, and there were some problem to solve, no? And they asked who want to work on this problem, and so now we have assigned a problem, and we need to bring our what we think that could be the right solution. So, and what did you saw is interesting. How can you be in a group and receive the information without work inside the group? No?
Because you do this because at some point the national committees have to say, okay, what you have done insofar is okay for me. So because when something has to be published and become an ISO standard, every country has to discuss about the document and say, for me, this is okay. It's no longer a discussion at an expert level, but a country level. So even if I'm not a member of the group of smart contracts, I received the document of smart contract because I have to create with other colleagues the official position of Italy. And the official position will be yes, no, abstain, with all these comments. Please change this, and that. That's the idea. This is a more formal approach because we are doing this at a state level. So it's not only my voice, it's that we have to make a specific meeting in the Italian delegation, in the Italian National Mirror Committee, and discuss about that. So sooner or later, you know everything. That's the point. Not every time you could influence what is happening. That's the point. It's a different, clearly. But they are very big, complex process, but at least you could try to participate. Okay, I think there is a thanks, Simone, for these very interesting elements. It is something else? We have still a few minutes.
Yes, please, if I can make a question, please, Paolo. Thank you so much for your view. It was really, really interesting. I found that standardization is needed to as a market maker to create the market to break. But I want to ask you about your opinion about how are the timings between standardizations and regulations. I mean, we are all fighting for standardization, for making this market, but sometimes we found that regulations is first than the standardization. So it doesn't allow us to continue in this way of standardization. No? It's like a big fight between 2 points of view about how to protect or to develop the market. No?
Oh, yes, thanks for this very interesting question. Yes, this could be quite a problem in Europe because sometimes there is a process by which when you see that the standards has been published by a European organization like ETSIS and CENELEC, there is a formal process by which the Commission could accept it and make it a part of the regulation to have the so-called harmonized standards. And this is something done usually by lawyers that we're working with the domain experts. And they say, okay, what is written in the standard is compatible not with the regulation. If it is okay, the standard is accepted. And this means that I'm not a lawmaker, but what I do when I standard things is something like I'm a lawmaker. This is quite a problem. There's a loophole in this part of the legislation. But there is a possibility you say, yes, as an example, we have already GDPR. GDPR could be or could not be a conflict with blockchain. That's the point. Usually what I could tell you is that every regulation in Europe is technology agnostic. In fact, the GDPR is not targeting blockchain by itself. There are some possibilities at the time being to manage it, to avoid any problems. The question is, you could decide either to innovate, as you said, and I could accept the idea of taking some risks because someone in Europe could say, why are you using blockchain for managing this personal data, considering all the problems that you have? Why you are not using a database? Databases have been used for tens of years and they work very well. This is the problem that has no other way. And this is a risk. And the other is saying, okay, please, I need a standard. Or I need a standard and I'm working on standard and I have a standard and with this I have solutions. Unfortunately, the problem has not a very simple solution. That's the point. Because we cannot say ask to the lawmakers, please do not make any regulation because we want to discuss in ISO. That's the point.
But it could be a way. It could be a way.
Yeah, I'm not sure they would be happy with that. Okay, but yes, but what you could do is try, as an example, there are some, but if you need, as an example, some advice, there is another initiative from European Union, which is the European Blockchain and Observatory Forum. They have published some documents giving some hints. They are not legally binding, but giving some hints how to manage regulation. Mm-hmm. And also there is a very interesting report written by the European Parliament on how blockchain could be squared, if I remember the word, with the GDPR. It's a very complex document, 120 pages long, but this could give you some insights on how to try to manage. Mm-hmm. But this is why we have created CENELEC, exactly to manage this kind of problem at the European level, because it has to be managed at the European level. Otherwise, European companies will say, okay, I cannot do anything. We say I cannot do anything while our friends and competitors in the United States are doing things. That's a problem that we have. This is why we created the CENELEC. This is why we ask the European Commission to support it.
Mm-hmm. That is. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your question. Okay, I guess that we have the very end. So
I have one more question. This is Kari Korpela from Finland, DB Core Ltd. Just related to this last discussion about GDPR regulation and blockchain. So we have made the solution so that we take all the information from our blockchain solution to off-chain solution, which is related to GDPR. So are any of you experience of this, how to do that?
Okay, I'm not in a position to give you any technical advice. I could tell you that these documents from the European Blockchain Observatory and Forum, these reports from the European Parliament about blockchain and GDPR, they are already discussing the off-chain approach to personal data. What I could tell you is that, as an example, in some cases, solutions that we as developers think are very well, like I store just an hash of this data on the blockchain, and then I keep the data off chain, are not necessarily compatible with the GDPR, because according to one of the possible interpretations of the GDPR, an hash is, if it's an hash of personal data, is personal data by itself. And so you have a problem that you have personal data on blockchain. And this has to be solved. There are only two possible ways: in the courts all over Europe, because you pay a lawyer to say you're right, or other possibility because there is a standard. At the time being, it's very difficult. You could only try to use a hash of data, try to avoid managing personal data. You would try to implement as Algorand does commitments to allow the possibility to erase personal data from the blockchain, but I see something there's still a lot of work to do. I encourage you to look at this document, see what they are doing at the time being, and what they're advising, not doing, what they're advising to do.
Yes, thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much, Paolo. Sorry for interrupting, but it's already 10:30.
You're right.
So thank you very much. Grazie
thank you, everyone.
For your presentation.
Thank you, everyone.
It's been very interesting, this kickoff of the bootcamp. So thank you very much. And